I reject these accusations.
Maybe choose some terrific Alberta craft beer instead.
Our government's position is clear. It must be built, and it will be built.
This is a very strong Canadian action.
The people of Ontario have spoken.
I intend to run in the upcoming by-election here in Burnaby South.
This party is too intellectually and morally corrupt.
He is more interested in advancing his personal profile than advancing conservative principles.
Canada reached an agreement in principle with the United States and Mexico.
Let's start working together.
We are lifting the prohibition. That's what legalization is.
We are essentially giving our oil away for free.
Just some of the big moments of 2018, and I really stress the some. On the other hand, I can't believe all that happened in just 1 year, which is always the case when we do these. What better way, though, than to dig into all of it with the At Issue gang, all here with me in Toronto to talk about the year that was Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Paul Wells, and Althea Raj. Good to see you all in person. I know you want to do it like this every year, every week, but
we do.
Okay, let's start with the first question. MVP, MP of the year. Two of you had the same answer. I'll start with you, Chantal.
Chrystia Freeland, not just because there was an agreement reached, but for having the patience to stand and hold her line for all those months. It has to have been challenging, and I think by far she did an outstanding job. I wouldn't say that the Trudeau cabinet is the best I've ever seen, but even in a better cabinet, she would still stand out, I think.
You agreed?
Yes, I think, and she preserved her dignity in the countries in the process. She's now, I think, the second most high-profile minister after Morneau, and without any of his baggage. So I know we shouldn't be handicapping these things ahead of time, but in some post-Trudeau leadership race, she'd be a contender.
But you thought who?
I'd say the Prime Minister. I think he is the party's biggest asset and their biggest liability. They will sink or swim depending on how he does. I agree Chrystia Freeland did a really great job, but I think he is why the Liberals are where they are now. He's also why the Liberals sank after, I don't know if we're getting ahead of ourselves, but with regards to the India trip, for example. So I think it's kind of obvious the Prime Minister is the most valuable player, but that is my pick.
You had a very off the radar.
Just on the assumption that all these ones would be predictable. I decided that MP should mean not leader, not cabinet minister. I went with Alain Reyes, who is the Quebec lieutenant to Andrew Scheer, but easily the most prominent Conservative MP who was elected in 2015. Everyone else who's got prominence in that caucus is of older vintage. And he held the Quebec wing of the party together when Max Bernier left. He delivered an important by-election win. He is an utterly conventional politician, which may come to help the Conservative Party because a lot of their other prominent faces are tempted by more populist streams and currents in the movement, and he's more of a traditional Conservative. And the Liberals are still streets ahead of the Conservatives in Quebec. But if there's a surprise, it'll be because this rookie, Alain Reyes, held them together when things were tough.
Okay, biggest party. No, we don't get second tries here. It's got to go fast.
Can we disagree?
Yes, you can totally disagree. The biggest party liability. Three of you had the same answer, and Paul, because he's an outlier, did not. Andrew goes first.
Jagmeet Singh. I've never seen a party so vocally and unashamedly dissing their own leader, with reason. He's been several times appeared unprepared on various files. To be fair to him, he was kind of thrown into the deep end, but that's a choice the party made as leader. And he polls, the party's polling kind of mediocrely. He polls in the low single digits.
Both of you agreed, so Althea.
Yeah, Andrew's right. He drags the brand of the party down. When you attach his name, the party polls around like 11, 10%. If you don't put his name there, the party is at like 17, 16%. He doesn't even seem like he's trying. And that's the thing that I find really perplexing. He ran a very disciplined campaign to get the leadership, and then it kind of all fell apart. He's not out hustling. He doesn't know some of the party's policy. He reacted badly on the whole David Christopherson voting against the party. And yeah, I mean, it's very rare that NDP MPs who usually speak in one voice are actively criticizing their leader unabashedly to members of the press, and they are.
it's a steep learning curve to come from the opposition at Queen's Park and become a national leader, but others have had that curve, Alexa McDonough, to name one, and have managed to work with it and to come up with results without a seat in the House of Commons. So the words "in over his head" come to mind whenever he appears, and I can't see that he's growing into the job in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, outlier.
As the candidate of diversity, I say Nicola Diorio, joined in the late innings by Raj Grewal. Any incumbent government runs on managerial competence. On any given day, the Liberals can't find 2 of their MPs. As Oscar Wilde would have said, losing 1 MP is tragedy, losing 2 starts to look like carelessness.
All right, that was good. Best political play. I think they're almost all, well, no, the 2 are the same. Okay, so Paul, you start us off. Best political play.
Getting an NAFTA deal. Look, the Conservatives aren't wrong to continue even today harping on the notion that they gave in a lot of concessions in order to get almost no gains in the deal. That plays well to Conservative support. The Conservative base believes that. Not a lot of other people do. The failure to get a NAFTA deal was a real albatross for the Liberals until the day that ended. And now they're covered off on the biggest. Brian Mulroney and a million other people have always said the things you got to worry about are Canada-U.S. relations and national unity. Canada-U.S. relations was completely up in air, and now it's nailed down, and that's a huge advantage for the Liberals.
You agreed.
It's the biggest issue of the year, the one that had the biggest potential to really sink the party. It's not that they handled it all that brilliantly. I think they made a lot of missteps, and there's no doubt that the final agreement is worse than the agreement we had, but it could have been so much worse. And that, frankly, is what politics is mostly about. It's not about political masterstrokes, usually. It's about avoiding calamities and disasters, what Jean Chrétien used to talk about, falling through the ice. And they managed to avoid disaster.
You were sort of in that vein, a little bit.
Yeah, I agree that getting to the NAFTA 2.0 was really important for the government, but I think what was masterful for them is how they changed their tone and their approach with dealing with the White House. For a year and a half, you had Justin Trudeau meeting with Donald Trump, trying to play nice, saying very nice things, trying to get on his good side, like me, and then just before the G7, March 31st, when the Prime Minister said that Donald Trump had asked him to come to D.C., sign this deal, and then Mike Pence called him and said, well, if you're coming, you should know that you have to agree to a sunset clause for 5 years. And then the Prime Minister had this press conference where he actually, for the first time, kind of badmouthed the president and said the guy lacks logic, he has no common sense. And that was the beginning of the harsher tone that the Prime Minister's office started taking. And I think that was really instrumental for the Prime Minister to kind of wrap himself up in Captain Canada and get Canadians on side with him in that battle.
Okay, 6 minutes to go. Somehow we're going to do this. You went somewhere entirely different.
Out of the federal bubble, but still coming back to the point that there are 2 big files and one is Canadian unity, I picked François Legault because this is someone who started off in a prominent position in the Parti québécois. He could have hung around and become the leader of that ready-made party. To step away and start a new party, God knows it's hard to ask Maxime Bernier in a decade, and to recast Quebec politics outside of the federalist sovereigntist, that is really quite a feat. And when people write the history of Quebec, from the Quiet Revolution in 1960 to wherever, 2018, there will be a mark on that year for that election. And I think that's really worth noting.
Biggest political misstep. 3 of you agreed, and 1 of you, it sort of speaks to this. And I'm going to play a clip so you all know what they agreed on. Here you go.
If I had to redo that trip, I would do it very differently.
Would you wear the outfits?
No, I probably would not. I think that was a clear. I mean, I had more suits on that trip than I had outfits, but the pictures of the outfits dominated.
Okay, so as Althea, Chantal, and Andrew all said India trip, Paul said something about values, which I think you can probably work into this. Yeah. So, I mean, it was obvious, I guess, that it was not a good time for the government.
From first to last, not just the PR debacle of the suits, et cetera, but the Otwell affair and their handling of that, which subsequent evidence has shown was they were responsible for inviting him. They mishandled that in all kinds of ways.
This is the attempted killer that showed up in pictures beside the Prime Minister's wife and had a big dinner.
So it speaks to his vanity, I think, in some respects. It speaks to how unseriously they're treating the India file. As somebody said, that they would never have done this in China. It was really, and he was already starting to slide in public estimation before that, but this really cemented a lot of impressions of him, and I think they're still dealing with the aftermath.
Just to add to that, I don't think they don't treat India seriously. I just think they view it as such a PR move for a domestic audience in Canada that was the primary focus of the trip, and that's one of the reasons it was a disaster.
Yeah, I did note that it came shortly after Jagmeet Singh became the leader of the NDP, and it kind of looked like a ploy to say, look how diverse we are. It's not necessary that we have a diversity in the leadership because we are the most diverse party.
We love India more.
Yes.
And yours is, it's sort of related, I guess, in some ways,
It's kind of broader and subtler. It's the Liberals' inability to proceed on any file without, or maybe less interesting.
Let's see.
It's the Liberals' inability to proceed on any file except by claiming superior virtue. Yeah. I've covered a lot of, I've been around for a while, and I've covered governments that were able to say, we're just problem solving here, or we're just exercising common sense, or we're just doing what Canadians want. These guys cannot do anything without claiming to be closer to some ideal Canadian value. And everybody I know is sick of it.
And there's different types of liberal arrogance. Liberal arrogance used to be we're the party of power, you live with it.
Yes.
This is an arrogance of we're superior, and that really grates on people.
I would argue it's been in their DNA for a long time.
Okay, this might be the last one we do, so let's do it fairly quickly. But I think it's an important one because you all have good answers. The most underreported political story of the year, Chantal.
Last budget, pharmacare suddenly appears in the federal picture. Commission is going to look into it. It's spun as the big promise for the next election. When was the last time you heard about what happened to pharmacare? I would think that you can call it the Doug Ford factor. You can't have a national program without buy-in from Ontario and Quebec. Quebec has a pharmacare program. I don't think Doug Ford is buying a pharmacare program from this government.
Paul.
It's the extent to which fake news, Russian trolling, the surprise Trump election is motivating the Liberals as they head into an election year. They're quite convinced that governments all around them have fallen because of essentially illegitimate outside interference. And it's driving their decisions about an election debate panel. It's driving their decisions about the election law. It's driving this absurd decision to subsidize large news organizations in the country. They are terrified they won't be allowed to fight on fair ground because of the machinations the other side. And they've decided that it gives them license to do some very extreme things.
Althea.
Climate change, human activity is poisoning the planet, and we are not talking about it enough. All the parties have, frankly, insufficient responses to it. But even globally, I feel like, how many times do scientists need to bang us over the head? Now we have the head of the UN saying, hey, we're on a suicidal mission, people pay attention, and nobody seems to be doing enough on this file. And to me, that maybe it's a generational thing, but I really think that people are going to think long and hard. Do they want to have children in the future? What does it mean? Migration crisis, all these things are coming to our doorstep, and we're not paying enough attention to it.
I think she just called all the rest of us old.
We took notice.
The last one to Andrew.
The looming crisis in provincial finances. We've all been focusing on the federal file. Is a $20 billion deficit a problem or not? Meanwhile, the provinces are heading, as the parliamentary budget officer reported, several of them are heading within 2-3 decades for 200% debt to GDP ratios. To give that perspective, when Saskatchewan nearly hit the wall in the 90s, they were at 60%. Long-term extrapolations can be doubted, you've changed policies, but these are baked in because it's about demographics. It's about the age of the population and the healthcare costs that go with that. So there's a very real prospect, a very hard thing to avoid, that one or more of these provinces is going to be in default of its debts at some point. I don't think we've begun to wrap our minds around that.
God, that's a depressing way to end everything, but that's what we're going to do. Let's do it all again next year. Thank you all very much. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rosie.